always doing videos on what is requested. What's been requested a lot is the Ruby Sapphire matchup that a lot of people seem to be struggling with. And I'll admit, like, we're an aggro style deck, and for some reason in Lorcana, aggro has a fairly bad matchup into control decks, which is like never really the case in other TCGs. In other TCGs, like when you play into a control based deck, the aggro deck always supposed to be able to go under them and have a very like 70 to 80% win rate, something ridiculous like that. But in Lorcana, for some reason, it never works out that way. Aggro decks seem to fold quite heavily to the control decks, except for some outlanders, I guess, like Purple Steel can have a fairly decent game into it. But even on the draw, it's still kind of rough. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Sapphire Steel Kiwi deck into Ruby Sapphire. And in that matchup, I think what you're aiming to do is, of course, do the strong curve. We pretty much don't have to worry about these removal cards. We just want characters on board that quest for lore. So turn one, I mean Bell, like the high roll, we don't have to worry about that as much. We can sort of put that on the back burner. I think Mulan is fine because you pretty much just want a thing on board that's going to start questing. Of course, if you can get Bell, like if you have Porp and a Bell in your opener, like don't be alarmed just to keep that. And in a blind matchup, you won't know what it is, so you're probably going to deep Mulligan for the Bell, so it's absolutely fine. The deck should be able to land on its feet if you don't manage to get those cards. And in the deck as well, we've kind of this is a different version. This is the version I've been testing because I have my live list that anyone could pick up, and then I have versions that I'm testing, and this is where I've kind of got to. We took the Calhouns out and we've put the Annas in there because basically we want to say that our turn two is we're always going to place that in the quest for two, and Anna on two means followed by an Alice. And if you've already got a Mulan or a Bell set up, she's going to be questing for two, and Smee is just the best in that slot anyway. So I think on the play, this matchup should be very much just locked in. You just play aggressive questers, curve out, and then nearing the end of it, you play the Mukduk mana if you can, and then say like, hey, when you B prep, I'm still going to have a mana up, and then you just play off the top and play these characters down, and hopefully just get over the finish line. But the initial lore with Alice into Pluto into questing out should be quite a considerable lore. If you're not fearing the Maui as much, you could just play the Scrooge for one extra lore instead. And nearing that top end bit actually is a little bit more than just play the manas out. I think what you can do is you compete and stall for a turn. If they've gone fully in on, I'm just going to ramp up to 7 and then play Be Prepared. You can play Pete, and because they'll go, I have to pass one turn. And then when you run out of Pete's, you full quest again, you play the mana down. And at that point, you should be, 18, 19, 17 lore anyway, to the point where you are just going to get over the line with the location lore. And they won't have a Kuzga or a Hideaway and cards like that. They probably will answer it with that. But they are not able to play both those cards and play the Be Prepared on that turn, and that's kind of the position we're trying to get them into. I think as well with the Hyrims, it's very interesting to note is you can curve out, you can do two drop, one drop, two drop Alice, or you can get the item down on turn one and not play. I think on the play this works very well. You can play the item down on turn one, and then you can get the higher amount just to get you some resources. So after they've done the entire board wipe, you've still got stuff to put on the board. I think as well, you can also top it out on turn five. You play the Port School and the Hiram, draw some more cards. Maybe give the ward to the Hiram, and if they're not going to remove everything, he gets 4 cards for you, which is great. That's better than Doc ever could. And it's also managing, having those resources after they do the Be Prepared because we don't have the big cards like Gantu. I think Gantu is a very good card, but it's going to win you some matchups. But I think into a Sapphire Coil meta where basically we kind of have to treat all of our cards that don't have Ward as if they have less than 2 or less strength anyway, because the coil is so effective in what it does. You just have to ink and then you can minus it. So Gantu being able to be reduced to a 2 strength character with ease just kind of makes me like I don't really want to play Gantu, and unless you're able to get the Alice ward off. But even Gantu as a top deck is kind of rough in that sense because if they're able to ink and then they can unlock all their removal like Brawls and stuff like that and Medusas which they use. So yeah, I don't think he's that great. But I think really what we're aiming to do here is just play this strong curve out, and we just basically want a character on the board every turn that can quest. And the most optimal ones is, of course, our one drops are always going to quest for one. That was the same as it was in set 6 when we played Robin Hood and Mickey Mouse. We want them down, and then we want Anna into, Smee or whatever, Alice into Pluto just to make the board awkward when they try and counter it with the Maui. Kind of putting that lock in means they have to be prep, but otherwise it's just like they're not going to be clearing enough, and Maui's just going to be a bit too slow. Um, So that's just another way to look at it. I think the bell turn one, the other bonuses is she can sing Let the Storm on a Tipo or a little Sisu, which means that they can't pop your Pluto. So that's pretty good. Sometimes as well, as I say, get the mana out. It's sometimes nice to play it. Maybe you'll be at about 6 ink or 5 ink. You can play it when you're expecting to be prepared, but of course you can also just play it on turn four as well. They likely don't have a board set up for it. I wouldn't play it into a Tala that if they've got a Tala down or a Scrooge down because they'll play Maui next turn and run it all in. But if they haven't really started to put anything on the board, you can get the mana down early. I've won many games by just playing mana on four, mana on five, and then just getting over the finish line by they'll invest in Maui's and run them in, but that's like 4 turns it will take for them to answer the Murkduck manas. But I can go into a bit of a mulligan here. So like I say, if it was blind or whatever, you would probably still want to keep these two and send it all back. And then, in my opinion, not really the worst hand at all. You can ink the port, play the port, get the bell out. You've unlocked the Let the Storm for removing the Tipo and the little Sisu and kind of making it so that Pluto's going to get more work. If there's an Alice in this hand or just any 3 drop, I think it's a lot better. Sometimes as well, I say any 3 drop. I will sometimes, if I have the option between like some 3 drop or whatever, but I also have a Smee in hand, I might just play the Smee because it just quests for more. And later on in the game, he's not going to do as much because he's going to be removed. But yeah, being able to protect him as well with the Let the Storm on the Tipo or the little Sisu because they can't just run it in after he's quested twice is just another thing that's really great. Them not having steel removal, all of their removal being fairly expensive to use, is just pretty good for us, and we can get a lot of positives from here. I'd say if you're on the draw here, this is kind of rough. I think we would maybe not gamble on um, losing this. I think actually even on the draw, I think maybe there's a possibility that you just send it all back, hoping that you can get a nice little curve out here. So that's kind of a rough hand to the point where I'm just going to do another one just because I thought that was so bad. But yeah, this can maybe explain my point a bit more. I think here is absolutely fine. You could keep all these. You got a 1, 2, 3. I think we'd really want to look for that Pluto. There's a sense where you could keep this Fortisphere in hopes that you draw the bell, which means you could maybe unlock the Let the Storm Rage on, which means you'd keep that as well. But that is just basically preying on the best hand you could possibly get. So I'd send that all back. And then yeah, you've got like a fairly decent curve there. You've got 1, 2, 3, into 4, into 5, into if you draw the pop score later on, which you probably should. There's a high chance you can. You can play it and play the Hiram, get your resources back, and be like, be prepared. But I'm going to be at 3 cards or 4 cards or whatever cards you have left, plus the Hiram, plus the turn draw. So you have loads of resources to just keep spamming the board and make it awkward. And what we're noticing a lot of Ruby Sapphire is it's fairly expensive for what it's trying to do. Um, it's everything costs a lot. Red removal costs a lot. They don't really sing much. They'd be prepared, but they never really sing it. Maybe they sing it from a Sisu once or twice, but even that feels awkward because you have to remove your own Sisu for it. So all their answers are very expensive, and if we're just playing cheaper stuff and just playing stuff out on the board and saying, here's 2 Smees, answer 2 Smees, their response is like ink twice with ink twice to make the coil buff and then play a Sisu, which means that's cost them 2 cards in hand into the inkwell, play a big Sisu. It's got some 8 ink as well, so it ends up being quite an expensive turn for them. So here would be another hand. Yeah, you just keep a Porks, keep Smee if you're on the play. I don't think that's the worst. I mean, there's a bit clunkiness going on here, but you get the Popsicle out. Maybe you draw the bell, maybe you don't. But you have the Popsicle then set up for the Hiram later on. Actually, I kept an Anna there. I really shouldn't have done. I think my brain thought that was an Alice. But if this was an Alice, you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be definitely a lot better. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired then. I thought that was an Alice, that's why I kept it. But yeah, even keeping the Scrooge warded up is pretty nice. But also as well, you could just put the ward onto the 2 drop so you can quest for an extra law. And Scrooge is good because he'll 1/1 a Maui. Maybe you want the ward out just to protect the Scrooge from sorry, like being hit by the coil or whatever. But it's just basically being this aggressive and obnoxious deck. What you'll find as well is with their coil, they'll do like one removal for one removal. So if you go 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, and they're like coil, ink, Sisu, yeah, they take your Smee, but you've got 2 other characters here. They haven't really answered much. They only have this 1/1 on board that it can easily be hit by Let the Storm Rage on. So yeah, you can easily find your ways around there. Um, Now here again, you've got 1, 2. I think maybe you'd even keep the Pete. Sometimes I've seen a lot of them playing how far you go, and to be honest with you, stopping them singing that how far you go very early on. I don't know how good some people can sometimes think that is. It's pretty useful to do. it kind of screws their curve up a bit if they're planning to do it and planning to get to a certain ink and they haven't, and then they have to how far you go the following turn, when all they really wanted to do was sing it from a Tala or whatever. So an early Pete is always an option as well. So I'd send them all back, and I think at this point, yeah, I'd get the Ink the Mulan, get the Bell out because we unlock a Singer there, we unlock a decent body. You know, 1-1's a Tala, 1-1's whatever. It's not very easy to remove. Uh, Try and ink something else, get to the Smee, maybe play the P, and then maybe double Smee on turn four. On the play, that'd be amazing. If you had three Smees out and questing on the play, that's amazing. But on the draw, you only get like you'll get one less turn of questing with them because they'll be able to B prep. But yeah, I think overall with a matchup, you're trying to hit the most optimal curve you can. You know, hit every beat. Quester on one, Quester on two, Quester on three, Quester on four, Quester on five, and then when you get to the point where okay, they're one ink off, be prepared. Play a Pete, stall a turn. Usually, if they're going to be prepared aboard, they've only really invested in playing that be prepared because otherwise they'll lose a bunch of their characters, like their Hirems and their stuff like that. And also as well mean like if they've gone ramp, invest in a Maui to kill stuff, and then ramp, invest in be prepared, their hand's going to be kind of dead. They've invested too much, they've dropped too many cards in hand, so they shouldn't really be doing that. They will probably just invest in playing the be prepared and getting the payoff there. So you peat them, get another turn, full quest, and then you mana them, full quest, and you should be able to just go over the line that way. Especially on the play, on the draws, they get the jump and they get the start. It can be a bit harder. I would just say at that point, look for the best lines you possibly can, even if that means sort of doing a mulligan that feels fairly risky if I was to show you, because you're basically not going to win if you don't get the mulligan you need. So there you go. Don't know why I keep poor Piffer Force Sphere, I just prefer it. Send it all back, and yeah, that's fairly risky. But in this scenario, like I say, I would probably ink a bell, get the port, get the bell out, and then Smee, and then on turn three also play a Smee because we're basically trying to get as much lore on the board as we can, questing for much as we can, and then get these Scrooges out as well, just to quest, and there'll be 1-1s when they trade with the Mauis, if so. And if not, the Sapphire Cord is fairly awkward for them. They ink and they can't actually take it out with a Brawl or a Sisu. It's only Medusa really. Um, so yeah, it's just basically trying to see, look at your cards, how much lore can I get out of this? When I get to those be prepared, when I get to those big CC turns, how can I continue getting lore? And Pete and Mana are the two most optimal cards for doing that. I could see John Silver being put in the deck again. If Maui Shark is going to be a big of a problem, but I'm not seeing much issues with Maui Shark these days. Just gives you another turn of, they might ink up to John Silver, play John Silver, and then hopefully they think they can start controlling your board with the Maui Shark. But if you John Silver for a turn, full turn at quest, full quest with everything, they might go, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to lose because if they quest everything again next turn, and I've invested so much in this Maui Shark paying off, it can give you that turn where they have to be prep the entire board, slam your manas down, do whatever you have to. A completely empty board, the only answer is Cusco or Hideaway, which also aren't great answers in my opinion either. Um, so yeah, you can just get over the line with that. John Sylvia, another card if you're really fearing the Maui Sharks, in addition to the list, just to get you over the line because you don't need to win the board, you don't need to stomp them out of the game, you don't need to technically beat them. You just basically have to get to 20 lore before them. You don't have to be in these amazing winning board states because you are quite the aggro deck as well. So yeah, hopefully that works. Whenever you look at your hand, just try and see how much lore can I get before they start winning the board with Be Prepared and Sisu. How can I use my Pete the most efficiently, and how can I use my mana and make sure that the mana will be in a good spot where it's not going to be easily removed. It's going to be a very awkward thing for them to answer. Definitely, yeah, and deck wise, four manas is like the best answer we have. I don't think we invest heavily into it because even if you invest very heavily into it, you don't make the matchup that much better. Mana is really the only natural fitting card that improves the deck, and it also improves that matchup. Everything else kind of feels a bit like it doesn't do those things. So yeah, hope some of those points helped, and hope you can start winning your Ruby Sapphire matchups.